How is everybody?
Doing well. Hello.
Hey, everyone.
Okay, so this is a great battle of CI/CD technologies. And folks tell me I don't have a video, so you will see my picture without me moving. But this is Anton Waiss, or as folk call me, Ant Waiss. And today I'll be moderating this battle, making sure nobody gets hurt. And today we have with us three titans of CI/CD. And that would be, well, first of all, Melissa McKay, who is the developer advocate at Jfrog, and who will be presenting to us such wonderful technologies as AWS Code Pipelines and the Jfrog Platform. And then we also have Sebastian Daschner with us, who is a self-employed Java expert responsible for writing a couple of books on developing Java microservices. And he's also a Java champion and a Java rock star and a lot of other titles. And Sebastian will be talking to us about Jenkins X and Tekton with Argo City. By the way, Sebastian, isn't Jenkins X basically Tekton?
Well, yes, but plus a lot of stuff. So there are certainly similarities, but I would say out of the box, Jenkins X ships much, much more.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that. And then last but not least, we have Viktoria Алмазова with us, who comes from Microsoft today, and who will be battling for Azure Devops and GitHub workflows, right? Hello, Victoria. How are you?
Thank you, and I'm doing well, and I'm happy to be here and join that battle. Let's see who is the best.
Okay, so let the battle begin. And first, we'll let each one of the contenders present their tools, and then we'll start with a short presentation, and then we'll go over each of the tools and present their pros and cons in a few categories. So let's start with just a short presentation. So Melissa, the mic is yours. Tell us a little bit about AWS Code Pipeline.
Hi. Yes, I'm excited to be here with everyone. I'm going to start talking about AWS Code Pipeline to begin with. This is something that's relatively new to me, but something I wanted to explore a little bit more. So some important things that I found out about AWS Code Pipeline is, let's just get this straight. Pipeline is an overused term. There are a lot of products out there now that have the name pipeline in it, and we need to talk about what that means. AWS Code Pipeline is actually just one part of a suite of products that AWS has that you can integrate with. The pipeline itself just moves through each step of your development pipeline so that you can begin with, grabbing your source from source control, building your source. You can build using some, external build server like CircleCI or Jenkins or anything like that. And then you move on to testing that build, the result of that build, and then you move on to deployment. So AWS Code Pipeline gives you all of those features to be able to trigger those certain stages. It's a lot to start with. There are a lot of tutorials available that you can walk through, but there are a lot of resources that you have to set up beforehand in order to get it up and running and get it working. So I think that's a general description of what it is and how it works. It's definitely tied to your AWS account. So that's another thing that we might discuss later, but good enough intro for AWS Code Pipeline.
So if you want vendor-locked pipeline, go to AWS Code Pipelines. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay. So next up, Sebastian, Jenkins X. What does the X stand for?
Yes, so the X is an interesting thing because if you might think, well, I know Jenkins, and then what does Jenkins and Jenkins X have in common? And the answer is the name and actually not much else. So Jenkins X is basically, well, what you would came up with if Jenkins were Kubernetes native. So it's kind of like, and this is similar to Tekton and Argo, but we will talk about this later. It's kind of like taking your CI/CD server and splitting it up into multiple components and scatter it across your Kubernetes cluster. So we're talking about CI/CD on Kubernetes. Without Kubernetes, it doesn't really make sense. So that's kind of like a prerequisite. And it comes with a lot of opinionated stuff on top. So whether that's good or bad, that's up to you. But it ships with a lot of things out of the box, Jenkins X, and it comes with an opinionated GitOps-based workflow. So if you like this GitOps way of doing things using pull requests and basically a Git central workflow, and you like Kubernetes, then Jenkins X might be for you as a technology. So I would say that's like a short introduction for that. So it comes with a lot of things out of the box. And if you really like this, Kubernetes way and a GitOps based way, your YAMLs with Helm chart and things like that, it really might be for you because it comes with quite some technology to get started.
Okay. So Jenkins X, tailor-made for Kubernetes and not really Jenkins. Okay, gotcha. Next up, Azure DevOps. What's Azure DevOps? Victoria, tell us all about it.
Yeah, let me start that don't get confused when you hear the Azure DevOps, that it's something new or exists only in Azure. Technically speaking, it's formally known as a Visual Studio Team services. So the people who used to work with the Microsoft technologies and the .NET, they are quite familiar with the terminology like the TFS and the Visual Studio Team services. And the Azure DevOps stands on that one, but it's completely different in today's world because it went the fundamental rebranding. I think it was in 2018. And got plenty of other releases 2020, which wasn't only the rebranding, like just starting to call it as an Azure DevOps, but it as well, it introduced the full application lifecycle management platform. So we are talking not about Azure Pipelines only, but we are speaking about the other services like the Azure Boards, which helps you to keep track of your work with the Scrum or the Agile processes, you name it. And then you do have the Azure repos, and then you have the Azure artifacts, and even more. So, and the nice thing is you don't need to use all of them. You just decide what you need and enable it. It lives in the cloud. And again, don't get confused that it's called the Azure DevOps because it can deliver not only to the Azure cloud, but as well on the premises, on AWS and the Google. So pretty flexible and powerful application lifecycle management platform.
Okay, with a very confusing branding.
Yeah, we need to have a bad sides too.
Okay, so, and we're coming back to Melissa to tell us all about the Jfrog platform.
So I must admit I'm a little bit biased on this one. I love Jfrog products. I've used them for most of my career, especially for artifact management. And that's the flagship product of the Jfrog platform is Artifactory. If any of you are familiar with that, that's probably the product that Jfrog is most popular for. However, a couple years ago, they brought in some other products, all under the same umbrella called the platform. That includes pipelines, which again is a CI/CD tool, and it has much of the same functions as other pipelines that you see out there. Has the capability of triggering on source control commits, building your code, packaging it, also storing those packages on Artifactory, and then being able to deploy using pipelines. One advantage is it's pretty open-ended. You can use anything that you can write in shell, pretty much, you can put in the pipeline and make it happen. So this makes it very, the capability of integrating with other products is pretty huge, and something that, they do like to say is that they're too integrated to fail. They definitely support source control, GitHub, Jenkins, other build servers, and you can deploy to any infrastructure that you like, plus manage your artifacts on top of that, including your Helm charts, all of your application packages, and including your container images as well.
Okay, so that's JFrog, a whole platform. Okay, and coming back to you, Sebastian, what can you tell us about Tekton and Argo City? Why are they even together in this presentation, in this battle?
Yes.
Is it fair? Like everybody else comes on their own and they come as a couple?
That's a good question already, a very good question. So let's come back to some more Kubernetes because, so Tekton and Argo is basically, like, again, Kubernetes native CI/CD. And you mentioned it before already, Jenkins X is actually based on Tekton as well. But if you want to use like the plain, you're like more down to the roots, Tekton pipelines, that really makes sense to use together with Argo. So what that is, Tekton is a Kubernetes native way to basically, do stuff like, run some pipelines, define some certain tasks, and then you can build them together to, a pipeline of multiple tasks and trigger them with some certain input and output and so on. And what Argo does, Argo is basically declarative GitOps-based CI/CD. So just saying, here is the target state of my YAML, just, apply, whatever that is. And these two in combination really make sense. So that basically allows you to, create some CI/CD. What I like about especially, the combination, but especially the Tekton and Argo approach is that it's very flexible on this abstraction of, whatever runs in a container will run in your tasks. Like you can literally define some Docker image and say, inside there is a shell script or some tooling or whatever, just run it and this will be the result of my task. So anything that runs on your Linux command line will be executable in Tekton and, this combination with Argo. So that's, I would say, this introduction. And again, only makes sense if you do Kubernetes.
Okay, so another option at having Kubernetes native CI and CD with the downside being that you have to use Kubernetes. What if I don't want to use Kubernetes?
Well, then you're doing something wrong in IT, right?
Yeah. Should I even continue?
That's not true.
Should I have a change of career?
No, that's the first punch thrown. Kubernetes is not the answer to everything. And I know there are a lot of projects out there that are not currently using Kubernetes. It doesn't make sense. They don't need to scale that way. They don't need to, they're just not that big yet. So I think at some point Kubernetes, you do introduce that, but it is a whole nother level of complexity that a lot of projects just don't need.
Well, you can also have a cluster with one node, right?
Why?
Folks, this is not about Kubernetes. Okay, and last but not least, we have Victoria again, telling us all about GitHub. GitHub is a Git management, Git repository management service. So what does it have to do with CI/CD?
Oh, come on. GitHub doesn't need to have the introduction. And I mean, seriously, if you don't want to do the Kubernetes style CI/CD pipeline, just come to the GitHub Actions. Okay, I'm teasing you, Sebastian. But seriously, I mean, I'm quite serious that GitHub is something what everyone knows, because I tend to call it as in LinkedIn for the developers, where you just show your profile, right? Because the GitHub is a platform for the social coding. And for the many years, we tend to knew that as a code management, as a collaboration tool. But for the last 2 or now, I should say 3 years, we know it as well capable to do the code workflow. So we have the GitHub Actions, we have a GitHub packages, and all what comes into the place as well, the code reviews, pull requests, and quite strong security and the compliance part of the GitHub. We just name it Dependabot, who is going to check your third-party libraries for the security. And there is a marketplace and integration. So when we speak about the CI/CD pipeline, which is in the GitHub Actions, think about all those small tasks you can just take it from the marketplace, and I think it's around several thousands of them available for the developers. So yeah, that's a GitHub just in the 2 minutes.
Okay, wonderful. So without further ado, let's go over each tool again, but now according to the categories that we've defined, and we'll start with the getting started experience. So how easy it is to get started with AWS Code Pipeline. Melissa, was it easy for you?
Okay. You know, it would have been easy for me if I was more of a full-on AWS customer. I think if you're already in that world, if you're already using a lot of those products that they have, and you already have familiarity around, the IAM roles, all of that stuff, I think you're golden. But just jumping in and using code pipelines, you do need a lot of setup in advance in order to do that. There's also some complexity around using different accounts. You may find it appropriate that you need to use different Amazon accounts for different access. And in order to make things work, you have to follow certain rules. For example, to use pipelines in order to pull from source, you need to make sure that your source is in the same region as that action. Also, some capabilities are only accessible in some regions. So yeah, there are,
do you also have to store your sources in AWS, or can it be somewhere else?
You do not have to. They do have their code commit source control available, but you can also use GitHub. That works too. Or you can use, S3. You can use a lot of other resources as well. So you're not restricted there, thank goodness. But yeah, there are a lot of good tutorials. Their documentation is really good. So in fact, I'm going to post some resources there. I added another line to this document. Just to mention, as you all can see, we're filling out this document here. This is something that we'd like to provide to you after from this discussion, so that you have something to remember us by.
Yeah, right. Yes, something I forgot to mention. Yes, we're filling up this this document here, of course, as best as we can. But yes, you'll have this as an artifact of what we're doing here. Okay, so that was about getting started with AWS Code Pipeline. What about getting started with Jenkins X, Sebastian? Well, one thing we already understood, we need to study ourselves some Kubernetes first.
Yes, so once you have Kubernetes, you're good, right? Well, no, yeah, that's one thing, as already mentioned. But also, it's actually a good question, and I'm not 100% convinced myself. Is it really, really good? Or there are certainly both pros and cons about the getting started experience, because Jenkins X comes with a lot of stuff out of the box. So if the default experience that you have fits you, that might be a very nice experience, because you just connect to your Kubernetes cluster and say something like, create some quick start project, and then it's creates all of these components that you might want to use for quite advanced workflows and things like that, which I think is pretty cool. But on the other hand, from experience, almost every real world project, you want to kind of like customize things, or you say, well, this workflow doesn't really 100% fit for us, and we want to change something. And because it's rather complex, or it comes with a lot of stuff already, you might spend some time just looking into like, hey, what did it actually just create once I hit a certain command? So it's kind of like, as always, with a very high level declarative technology, you can be very fast in using it, but also then seeing, okay, what actually has been created. there might be a lot of stuff there, which is both good and bad, right? Like there is a lot of stuff for you already, but you kind of want to know what you actually need. And it's more like kind of like one full person's job to fully understand and comprehend what it's there. And then you can customize all of these templates and charts that you get out of the box to basically fits your need. So what I would recommend is just taking the getting started quick start. I think there's some Spring and some Java projects out of the box available, and go play around with them and then see what you can take and what you can throw away.
Okay, so something like too much magic there.
There's certainly a lot of magic going on, yeah.
Okay, and is there any like graphical setup, graphical interface? As Jenkins users, we're used to maybe not a very pretty, but a very usable graphical interface.
Yes, so there are some, but this is actually a very good point that you mentioned. If you come from this Jenkins background, you might be surprised that is very little there. So there is this JX command line, which is using kube control under the hood and using some Kubernetes API under the hood. And this is the first class citizen of using it. As far as I know, there are some other attempts to make this kind of like to have several web UIs to show you the stuff, but it's certainly not the centralized website-based approach that you know from the old Jenkins or the traditional Jenkins world. So that's, yes, a little bit different. And maybe from my opinion, that's also something to be more expanded on that you see. But it's really more like if you think of a Kubernetes dashboard or so, then this is more closer to what you get with Jenkins X.
Okay, so a shitty graphical interface. I got you there. Okay, Azure DevOps. Victoria, what can you tell us about the getting started experience with Azure DevOps?
Yeah, like lawyers says always it depends, or the consultancy always says it depends. But to be honest, like all the offerings, they do present some learning curve. And if you speak about the Azure DevOps in that sense, it depends from which background you're coming, because like Microsoft-centric developers, they feel like being at home when they land in the Azure DevOps due to the knowledge of the VSTS or the TFS. On the other hand, for the fully newcomers, like from different platforms like the Jenkins and so on, there is a quite helpful way to start to build the CI/CD pipelines through the graphical interfaces. And additionally, like the most common use cases for the CI/CD pipelines are the people like the developers, right? So the Azure DevOps has a quite excellent, I should say, just excellent integration with IDEs like the Visual Studio, Eclipse, IntelliJ, and Android Studio, which makes Azure DevOps easy for the developers to manage their services alongside their code, not leaving their IDE. So, and last but not least, like Melissa was mentioning, there are different learning resources available, like one of them is what is called Azure which gives you already ready projects, which you can just click and run it inside of the Azure DevOps, which will build for you the CI/CD pipeline, and even if you need all surrounding areas like the boards and then so on. And you can even find some examples with the Kubernetes.
Okay, so if you like yourself some Kubernetes, you can still use Azure DevOps and not feel left out, right? Okay, wonderful. And let's go to Jfrog Platform. Can we have Kubernetes with Jfrog Platform? Melissa, it sounded like you don't.
You can.
It's not something you'd like to see. Yeah?
No, it's if you need it, you need it. But if you don't, you need to have the ability to not have to rely on it or depend on it. But yeah, you definitely, it doesn't matter. Your deployment can be whatever is necessary for your application or service.
Okay.
I just want to say, go ahead.
No, just getting you back to the getting started experience.
Yeah. Awesome graphical interface, since that's what we are talking about with a lot of these projects. One thing that I really liked was they have a like a free tier now that anyone can look at and sign up for and tour through. One of the really good improvements that they made over this last maybe 6 months is the Getting Started Quick Start Guide. So there are wizards available that help you set up all of the repositories that you need in order to manage your artifacts. And then also in the pipelines area, when you're setting up your pipeline, it is based on YAML. So, I mean, you do need, if you're familiar with Jenkins pipelines, it's remarkably similar. However, the pipeline itself has a really good visual representation of each of the steps. And if there's a failure in your pipeline, you can see it. It's noted by color. It is pretty amazing. The logging is really good too on that screen as well, being able to observe the activity of your pipeline. I did add some resources. They do have documentation for the pipelines, getting that set up, as long as some examples. That could actually be better. That's something that our team is working on actually right now. We need more tutorials, more examples of how to set those up appropriately. So probably pros, excellent graphical interface. The way you navigate makes sense. A con is probably we need more best practice scenarios and more templates, more tutorials.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, fine. Okay. Not enough templates. Okay, so this would be con. Wonderful. Thank you, Melissa, for being honest about the cons too. And back to you, Sebastian. How does it feel to get started with Tekton with Argo City?
Yes.
Probably a weakness there, because now you need to get started with 2 tools and not 1.
Well, yeah, kind of. But I would say both of them are, that's maybe a pro already. Both of them are rather easy to comprehend because they're very limited. They have a very limited scope. They do one thing and one thing pretty well, which I think is a good thing. This Tekton stuff basically defines your tasks and your pipelines and can execute them. And the Argo just deploys something to your Kubernetes cluster, whatever you tell it to. So this declarative approach. And I think that's quite nice. So what I would compare it, do you know the meme there? There is an image of a birthday cake, but it's not the cake. It's just, a little bit of flour and some eggs and some milk. And under there, it's like, here's your Linux kernel. Go ahead and compile it yourself. And with Tekton, I would say is a little bit similar. You could kind of say, here's your pipeline. Go ahead and build it yourself. So it's very, very flexible and kind of easy to comprehend out of the box. You just define a task and that runs whatever Docker image you define. But for the more pipeline approach, you have to plug it together. So the advantage there is that it's easy to understand. And with the individual tasks, a lot of them come out of the box. There's some dashboard available where you can just, with anything under the sun, basically, there's some small example there. And then for defining a template, a pipeline, you kind of like have to plug them together a little bit. Which both is a pro and a con. I mean, then it's kind of easy to understand, and mostly in CI/CD, you kind of should know what you're doing anyway, right? So that's the thing here. Argo is very straightforward, I would say. Once you connect this to your cluster, you just say throw some YAML on it, and it'll be happy, and just deploy it there. So this is quite straightforward. And then with the pipelines, well, you need to invest some, I don't know, boring afternoons to just plug together your pipelines, and then you're good to go, I would say.
Okay. So Argo does have quite a pretty looking graphic user interface, right? And Tekton has not.
Yeah. With Tekton, there's a dashboard. So this available, that was like open source included. This is quite straightforward. I mean, it's basically, you have some pipeline definitions and tasks. I mean, what you expect, right? It's very straightforward, but it works pretty well. So the only disadvantage is you have kind of like 2 places to go to, but that's pretty much it. So from the UI perspective, I would say it's very practical. And of course, it also comes with command line tools, and everybody loves the command line, right? So I think that's definitely a pro.
But again, it's granted, I already know how to package my code in containers, right? And run it in containers.
Yes, that is pretty much a prerequisite. Then you will be quite happy, I claim, because it's a nice abstraction over these containers, over these, container view. But yeah, if you don't do containers, then, why are we even talking?
Okay, nice. By the way, that's something we haven't talked about yet, but CI/CD tools can be used for more than CI and CD. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, Victoria, back to you. How easy is it to get started with GitHub Actions? GitHub Workflows.
Yeah, you're correct.
What's the name? Is it GitHub Actions or GitHub Workflows?
GitHub Actions, and you build the workflows.
Okay.
So you're correct, because I could start to speak about how easy it is to get started with the GitHub. I mean, everyone in today's world who are familiar with the Git are familiar with the GitHub. Therefore, it makes sense just to focus on the GitHub Actions. And for myself, I was pretty excited when the GitHub Actions was released, because it stands on the YAML, which over the year became like kind of the standard in the different areas. So in that terms, for the developers to learn how to write the GitHub Actions, I would not say it's complicated once you know YAML structure and how it gets formulated. And on the second side, there are plenty of the GitHub Actions available for you just to plug and play and see how it works. Of course, you don't have the fancy interface what you are looking for, but there are some syntax helpers and that stuff which allows you to jump into the GitHub Actions quite straightforward. And as well, the GitHub provides what is called as a GitHub Learning Lab, which basically will it's kind of like Melissa mentioned, the wizard, which will give you step-by-step instructions what you need to do to achieve that state and how it does work and so on. So for the people in the GitHub community, I think it was like quite a native extension.
Okay, makes sense. Actually, matches my experience with GitHub Actions. It's pretty easy to get started. Okay, so I'm sending a poll right now to the session chat in Telegram. So we'd like to hear how easy you think it is to get started according to what you heard, or maybe according to your own experience. Okay, chat sent, poll sent to the chat, and we're going over to the next category, and that is the features. Okay, so we haven't talked about all of the features. We've mentioned some. So who has the best or the most features? Melissa, what can you tell us about the features of AWS Code Pipeline? What can it do for us?
Well, it is pretty flexible. It does handle all of the stages of your pipeline. So you can handle source control along with it if you want. Obviously, that is another product other than AWS Code Pipeline, but it integrates well. So yeah, again, this is the vendor lock-in. It does integrate well with all of the AWS products, especially with using the roles and policies that you set up and things like that. You can build. There are build options available to you. It's called Code Build. And deployment is pretty broad. So you can deploy into pretty much any framework. You can use, Elastic Beanstalk. You can use any ECS deploy options. You can even, there was one tutorial that was pretty cool. You can deploy to Amazon Alexa, which I thought was pretty fun. That would be a good one to do. CloudFormation, there's a lot of features available there.
CloudFormation, okay.
So I guess that
what are
impressed me.
With the basic features? Can you schedule stuff, or is it only
Yes.
trigger based?
You can trigger. You can trigger actions. You can also set up custom actions. That's a little bit more involved. But for each of your stages, you can set up, pass failure scenarios. You can monitor the pipelines, find out exactly what has happened at any point in time. So it has all of the
test result
basic
analysis, things like that, reporting.
Yes, you can. There is the whole testing stage that you can do, and there's a lot of integration with different products there as well.
Like things, being a long-time Jenkins user, for example, for me, something like running unit tests and then having my JUnit output analyzed and presented in a graphical web interface is a given for me. Do we have this, for example, in Code Pipeline, something like that?
That I'm not sure. That is something that I've missed from other solutions as well, because I'm definitely impressed with the output from the testing utilities. But this may be something you need to build yourself unless you use one of the integrated test tools that are available.
And what about code vulnerability scanners, things like that? Can you use AWS utilities for that?
There are some scanners available, yes. If you use like their code artifact product, you can definitely get some scanning capability there.
So it's artifact scanning, not code scanning.
Yes, right.
Okay, fine. So a lot of features we'd expect, but nothing unexpected there. Integrations with their own native stack, but nothing unexpected, nothing other tools don't have, I suppose. Okay, that's what I heard at least. Jenkins X, Sebastian, what features does Jenkins X have that maybe other tools don't have?
Yes. So, well, what features does it have? Basically, everything that is regarding your CI/CD workflow or pipeline is definitely covered. But I think a very nice feature is this GitOps-based workflow, and not just for the like buzzword compatibility, but actually it's really helpful if you say you can use your whole CI/CD stack and just throw it into a Git repository, because then even if it takes some time to build this up, if you nuke your cluster afterwards, then you can always recreate it from scratch very quickly from just if everything is stored in Git. So this GitOps based approach, at the beginning, it might feel a little bit cumbersome, but it's really, really helpful. So that's definitely a feature. So to have your CI/CD env as code, basically. It comes with a quite sophisticated workflow. So if we want to use, some more advanced branches and environments and promotion between these environments using some pull requests and all of this, that's supported out of the box. For my taste, that might be sometimes too much depending on the project, but that's up to you if you want to use it. It comes, if you want, with a Nexus and for some artifact storage in the cloud. It does not include. It includes integration for all the major Git, providers and all of this, and basically, all other artifact providers and stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't really make sense to put your Git into your Kubernetes cluster, right? So I think it shouldn't include that storage inside. And what else is it supposedly supports multi-cloud, though I have to admit I had never tested it with multiple, clouds and clusters at once in one environment. But I think, that's pretty much it for most interesting features. And then, of course, all the usual stuff like, pipelines and all of these. But I think that GitOps especially is a good one.
Okay. So we've got GitOps. Okay, what about Azure DevOps? What interesting features do we have there, Victoria?
Oh yeah, where to start? So technically speaking, I will get back to the Azure DevOps pipelines, but in terms of the functionality, like I mentioned at the beginning, it gives you the full application lifecycle management platform. So you don't need to run after the third-party tools. You have everything in one place to manage your development work, starting from the planning and ending with the testing, through the Azure DevOps test plans, and then as well Artifact. Don't like it. Let's admit, people have a different taste, or you already have in place your ticketing system, or your Kanban boards, like Jira, or using something else. You can simply switch it off and use that instead. And speaking about the pipelines itself, one of the powerful things what Sebastian mentioned, present as well in the Azure DevOps. So technically speaking, you write your YAML, you write your pipeline in YAML format, and then you throw it and manage it as an other source code. And then another thing when it comes to the pipelines, specifically what I like as a security person, is that you can build in the approval gates. So when you deploy to the one production to another production, when you deploy to the test environment, when to the QA, you can integrate inside, hey, the deployment to the production is going to happen only once we specific people are going to approve this. And the approval request can be sent via standard Azure DevOps functionality, or you can integrate it with the Slack, Teams, or any other communication channel, anything that has a REST API, and get it. In this way, you can get the full GitOps experience. Technically speaking, and you mentioned the testing capabilities, getting the JUnit and that stuff. It's as well, it is present there too. Then all other things what are related maybe a bit more to the pull requests and that stuff, they are present there. So let me think what is... I'm trying to do the job for you and find the cons, I guess.
It's not for me. It's
there, I found another. Yeah, I found another one. The hosted and self-hosted agents, right? So you can go for the way that you can choose that Azure DevOps hosts for you agents, the build agents, right? Or you can choose your own self-hosted agents. And this is what I find the one of the biggest benefits across comparing with other products, except maybe GitHub, that you can get the Azure DevOps hosted build agents for you already built. So you don't need to think about the security, the maintenance, and that part. Just use them as they are.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, by the way. I suppose, Melissa, and that's a question to you. I suppose AWS Code Pipelines don't support self-hosted agents, or do they? Because I suppose they would like you to run your agents on AWS, not anywhere else.
They would, yes.
Okay.
They do make it very difficult to reach outside of their ecosystem.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, that's understandable. Okay.
It's a strategy.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. And Melissa, it's actually your turn to tell us about Jfrog Platform and how is that better feature.
All right. So as I mentioned before, Jfrog Platform it integrates very well with a lot of existing services out there. That includes observability stuff, Slack, for example, even being able to use the X-ray feature, you can actually pull that into your IDE as a developer and get information about packages that you want to bring into your project even before you check anything in. Being able to have that flexibility of just being able to write any custom shell script that you want and be able to include that in your pipeline, that makes it very flexible as far as your deployment architecture. As long as you have access to it, you can deploy there. You can build there as well. There is an internal secrets provider, so you can handle all of that information as well. What else? A really good API. There's a REST API available right now for pipelines specifically. They also have a CLI tool that is available for all of the other products as well. Pipelines is in process to be added to the JFrog CLI. What else? Okay. I did mention scanning capability. So yeah, they do have that. At the root of the JFrog platform is your artifact management. So being able to place all of those artifacts into the repositories that are hosted there, you can scan everything in there.
So can we have self-hosted agents coming back to the?
Yes. There you can. There is webhooks available that you can use in order to communicate with your stuff. It's pretty good. There's also
so I can connect my own agents to the pipeline and then run my stuff on my own agents.
You can do that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is an internal build solution as well, so you can build your packages internally using the pipelines. You can build containers, that kind of stuff, and there are they call them native steps that you add to your pipeline that are pretty easy to apply.
And by the way, we didn't talk about this. Well, definitely all of the Microsoft stuff supports Windows, but what about Windows support in JFrog Platform?
Windows support. So, I mean, this just means like if you're using images that are to be deployed on Windows, then yes, you can definitely do that. JFrog, they support any type of images, whether that's an OCI image or a Docker image, that includes those based on Windows as well.
So I need to have Windows containers. So, because
you can't. I mean,
in GitHub, for example, I know I can have Windows agents running my stuff.
Ah, gotcha. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that is something. I'm not actually sure if that is in production yet, but that is definitely something that was being worked on in pipelines.
Okay.
So if it's not there yet, it will be soon, being able to run Windows agents.
Okay, back to you, Sebastian. Are Windows agents supported in Tekton and Argo City?
That's a very good question. I was just thinking about that myself. If your Kubernetes cluster supports some Windows hosts, like some Windows nodes and your Docker images, but I've never heard of that, to be honest. So it's a little bit, too much of a question for me. So I would say probably not, but that is actually more a question on the Kubernetes and Docker support rather than the Tekton support, because the Tekton will just, run the image. And if that is possible, maybe with some subsystem, but I would say then if you need to run Windows, then it's probably, having a Kubernetes cluster that runs your stuff is probably the wrong thing to start searching. And yeah, so about the features, I just wanted to say it's a little bit unfair then to be mentioned after Melissa and all of these nice features from JFrog platform, because probably or admittedly, Tekton and Argo has the least features of all of these technologies, just because of the fact since it's a little bit more, like a lower level type of technology built on Kubernetes. What is quite nice about a feature that, basically everything you do would be some sort of resource, usually persisted in YAML. So you can just, of course, store these in your Git or in your version control of choice and do this type of GitOps approach. What I find quite nicely is that there are these clean and easy to comprehend web UIs from both Argo and Tekton, because, well, quite honestly, this technology can become very complex. And if you have an easy to comprehend UI, I think that's also a plus. And in general, it's very like flexible and customizable, all of that stuff. So of course, you can run everything that you want in Tekton tasks. And with this, it's also, I would say, quite easy then to customize it for anything. You just like have to, include it yourself and define what you want to do. But also, well, there's a lot of like just effort involved to do so. So you can basically integrate anything that you can integrate with a command line that runs in a container or that has an API, and then just build something yourself. And there might be something available with the marketplace or the dashboard already. That's a nice thing, and it runs nicely with the command line. So if you care about speed, I think that's also a nice feature comparing to some other CI/CD technology. These things run really quickly. Like creating a task that will create such a Kubernetes pod that just runs it through. That's quite fast and nimble. I like that. And if you're more the down-to-earth command line person running Kubernetes, then this is quite nice to integrate, because the command line is also quite nice to use, which might be a feature because, from experience, we all have been there to create a CI/CD environment, and then usually you end up with a lot of commits into your Git, now fixing CI/CD, now fixed, and you push again. And this is actually quite nice and with plain Tekton, because it's easy to have these turnaround times, these round trips. These are very fast if you just, write yourself a bunch of command line commands and just execute them and re-executing it. This round trip time and the speed is quite good. But yes, also for the downsides, of course, to be honest. So the integration with anything else is definitely possible, but always takes a little bit of effort to set up. Like any connection to any Git provider, you need to provide the credentials yourself and all of that, and pipe them into your containers. So that's a little bit of an effort there, but then it pays off in the long run, let's say, for the features.
Okay. And back to you, Victoria. So what do GitHub Actions provide in terms of features?
Well, I guess I need to drop the mic here, just like, in terms of the functionality. But if we speak seriously, then a lot of the things what have been previously mentioned, we have as well on the GitHub Actions. So speaking about the self-hosted or just hosted runners, you name it, you choose them. That's one thing. Another thing is, if you find something missing, like, again, we discussed with JUnit testing and so on, you either find it that as an GitHub action on the marketplace, or you can develop it and publish it on the marketplace again. YAML, yeah, it's I would say, if you look on the GitHub Actions, it continues to evolve, and we get more and more functionality almost every single week. And it with the focus that it tries to get the best pedigree from other CI/CD pipelines, and it listens a lot from the community part. The strongest side, again, I'm slightly biased because I'm the security person. What I find the most exciting part of the GitHub Actions or the GitHub environment itself is the strong presence of the security. So what you do get is automated scanning, like the Pandabot for the third-party libraries, the credential leak scanning, what GitHub provides you, and even it provides the capability to scan your code for the potential vulnerability. So there are plenty of functionality in terms of the advanced security. And I just don't want to jeopardize all the time here to speak in terms of the security. And in terms of the CI/CD pipeline functionality, like I mentioned, a lot of the things what we discussed previously and has been mentioned in the different products, I would, for the 95% would say were present on the GitHub Actions. And if not, just wait a few weeks and you will see them coming in.
Okay, there's one thing I see missing still. When will we be able to use actions from private repos?
Yes, that's a good point, which we had
We've been waiting for this like 2 years.
Yes, that's what you can write as a cons. I mean, it shouldn't be the perfect, right? It should have cons as well.
Okay,
But
yeah.
indeed, that's a most weighted functionality. And I was expecting this to coming in the new universe, but I hope it's coming.
Okay. Yeah. By the way, Melissa, coming back to you, what's the term for? So in GitHub we have actions to extend the functionality. What is it called in Jfrog Pipelines? Is it plugins?
We have plugins. You can definitely develop plugins.
Mm-hmm. And how do you develop plugins?
You can, for what specifically? So that, I mean, that, like I said, there's the pipeline itself is defined with YAML. There are some internal steps that are available that you can use that are provided natively.
So how do I build my own steps?
Build your own.
Okay,
you can use shell. You can just use a shell script.
Okay, and put that in a Git repository, or do I need to package it in a Docker image?
Yeah, so you can, I think best practice is just to put it in the Git repo, all of your pipeline definitions. You can separate them out so that they are organized well. Okay.
Fine, yeah. And not to break the flow, I'm sending a poll to the chat, and while I'm doing that, we're going to our next category, which would be, where is that? Okay, so integration and flexibility. Well, flexibility you all talked about, so let's talk about integrations. Again, I think this was mentioned, so don't talk too much. If there's one specific integration that you think other tools are missing and you can point out, please do. If not, just pass the mic to the next speaker, okay? So AWS Code Pipeline, Melissa, are there any integrations there that you think are missing from other tools?
Well, all of the internal integrations, all of the integrations to, code commit, all of their proprietary stuff. I guess that's the biggest advantage if you're already using all of those products.
Okay. And if you want to integrate to anything external, you'll probably have a harder time with other tools.
Yep.
Okay. Makes sense. So Sebastian, what about Jenkins X? We know it's flexible, but you said it's hard to make it do something that's not planned.
Yes, and because of this, it might be a little bit harder to integrate stuff that is not there in the list. So if you have a look at the docs, there's actually what is called maturity matrix. So with just some certain integrations about Git providers and stuff like that. And if whatever you want to do is not listed there, then you would need to, build your own stuff, which is definitely possible, but it requires a little bit more effort, because you kind of have to know about some Jenkins X, kind of like internal, or how it is built. And then you can, roll it back, use these YAMLs and extend it. And then again, save this in GitOps. So that's a good thing. So whatever you do custom, you can reapply quickly to a new cluster. But yes, that probably involves a little bit more effort to just integrate more other things, right? If you do custom stuff, always everything is possible, but with this, it's a little bit more effort. If you use something that is not included in that list, that doesn't come out of the box, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So there is no such thing as like a plugin framework for Jenkins X.
Yes, no, there is, but you would need to, know a little bit about the internals or the architecture, and you would kind of have to provide it yourself, or you would have to write it yourself. So you can hook into these components that are available. You can you use all of that, but then you kind of have to provide it or do it yourself. That's basically it. So as an advantage, you can include everything that that you can include with a command line tool or with an API, but you might need to create it yourself, the integration. But at least the good thing is it's possible.
Okay. Victoria, what about Azure Devops integrations? Something. Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely integrations with everything Microsoft based. We already talked about that.
And again, this is where people tend to get biased because it's not only about the integration with the Microsoft stuff, but it's the Azure DevOps. It's quite open in that sense. And like you mentioned about the plugins and that stuff, maybe I will shorten the time by answering for the both platforms because they do have the common. Like the Azure DevOps has a marketplace and the GitHub has a marketplace. So if you don't find anything what is suitable for your needs on the marketplace, like in the Azure DevOps case, you can write your own, and you even can create your own private marketplace. Like this is a quite needed thing for the enterprise organizations when sometimes they do write their own plugins, but they want to share this across their own organization, not outside, so they can have their own private marketplace. And it's having the answer short. Like I would say Azure DevOps in that sense is pretty flexible. The only downside, but that goes back to the previous question, what I see is that doesn't have out of the box the security capabilities like the GitHub or like Melissa mentioned, the Jfrog. This is where you need to use the third-party integrations. But otherwise, Azure DevOps has REST APIs, has a pretty good documentation how to write your own plugins, has the CLI, so it's kind of the Lego tool.
Okay. Good. Melissa, Jfrog integration. Okay, you've talked a lot. Basically,
I have. I've been filling in all the pros.
Yeah, basically, when you presented the tool, you said it integrates with anything. So,
yeah, there's quite a lot of stuff. Observability stuff I think is important. New Relic. What are some others? Slack. There's incoming webhooks, outgoing webhooks, Jira, PagerDuty, things like that you can really make powerful notifications for yourself if you need that. So all of those are important. And just one more word about plugins. We don't really have a plugin architecture, so to speak, for pipelines. They're written more as extensions, which are YAMLs, which have actions tied to them. But you can extend what's there.
But no marketplace as GitHub has or as Azure
There's
has.
By marketplace, you mean like we do have marketplace platform products in GCP and in Azure and in AWS.
No, I mean like in GitHub, for example, if I look for an action that does something, there is like a marketplace where I can search for different actions and
You're
see
correct.
their documentation, etc.
Nope, we do not have that.
Okay, gotcha. Sebastian, so what's with Tekton and Argo City integrations? Are they again like
Yes.
Possible. Anything is possible. Anything is flexible, but requires a lot of tweaking. The same story here.
Kind of, yes. Everything is possible, and it requires just some, compilation. So I just posted another resource link, this Tekton Hub. You can have a look at that. It's kind of like a marketplace for Tekton tasks. And this is a very good getting started thing. So as I mentioned before, you can basically build anything yourself if you want, but they already provide a lot of stuff, like, all of the typical tasks, tasks to be done. You can send some message to Slack, you can send emails and whatnot. You just, it's required, you're required to compose it, this pipeline. So I would say this integration it's kind of like a pro that it's easy to comprehend and very easy to do it yourself, because then you have to provide a Docker image and a little bit of YAML to create such a task yourself, but then you basically can do anything. But more the composability is that where you would spend your time, I would say, by saying, okay, my pipeline now does need to do these 20 steps. All of them are kind of like, easy to implement, something like this, or easy to integrate, but then composing them in the correct way, that's where you probably will spend your time. But other than that, it's very nice that it's very flexible. You can just integrate anything that you would like, and it doesn't limit you in any way. So just anything that you can, reach via the network, you can communicate with, and that's pretty much it, I would say.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, Victoria, you said you were talking for both platforms before, so we won't go over GitHub Actions again. And
yeah, it's just worth to add that in that sense, the marketplace is quite huge, and I think the reason for that is for the many years of the strong community on the GitHub.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, like on Tekton Hub, I just looked, and it looks like it has something like 100 add-ons, extensions, whatever they're named. I suppose on GitHub you have thousands.
Thousands, exactly.
Okay. And next category is, what is it? Community, ecosystem, actually quite related to marketplaces, etc., etc., etc. Is there a community and ecosystem for AWS Code Pipeline, Melissa?
Well, I mean, there is a lot of resources available that you can get to that are, external blogs, things like that people are writing about AWS pipelines, or code pipeline. As far as, like open sourceness stuff, not that I'm aware of. Okay.
Well, yeah. That's the image there, basically. More of a vendor locked tool, less of a community tool. Okay, Sebastian, Jenkins X. I suppose it's totally a community-based tool. Now, with Tekton, we've seen there's Tekton Hub. Is there anything similar for Jenkins X?
Yes. So I would say probably the community is a big plus, because you will find like some of the core developers there who are very helpful to just help you out on stuff if you're stuck. So I've noticed this myself. You can join some Slack channels, was it back then, and create some issues and whatnot. You could also say, well, is that a pro if you have to actually contact them, or if it would just run out of the box, or things like this. But also, to be fair, when I first tried it, it was a little bit less mature than it is now. So from the getting help perspective, yes, definitely. I don't know if documentation kind of like counts as community, because from the documentation perspective, it still could be a little bit more improved, or just given the fact that it's so complex or so overarching of stuff. But I would say the community is definitely a plus, that you will find people are very helpful and just you point you to the right places where you need to look if you run into errors. So I've experienced that myself.
Okay, community for Azure DevOps. Is there such thing? Victoria?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I mean, in terms of the dedicated community, I would be quite skeptical. It's rather that you have several channels to communicate. Similarly, like the Sebastian mentioned, either there are dedicated groups on the Slack or other type of chat platforms, or the Stack Overflow in today's world is, I would say, more independent and the best community place for the answering the questions. And if you would look after the tag of the Azure DevOps, then it's present. I think it comes with the cost of having the enterprise type of the Azure DevOps, where mainly consumers of such platforms, they tend to seek the help directly from the vendor itself. And then we can't call it as a community, right? There's a strong support in that sense, but I would be quite careful to call it as a community. So Stack Overflow.
Gotcha. Melissa, what about the Jfrog platform?
Yes, so this is also...
How good is the community and ecosystem there?
Yeah, there are some open source ecosystem tools that you can hunt for, but it's not real visible. Even the DevRel team, the developer relations team, is fairly new. I'm even not even on my second year yet on the developer relations team. So community is a goal of JFrog. It's not something I would say is fully established yet or visible, but it is coming. As far as support, again, it would be Stack Overflow, or if you are subscription based, you would have support there. We are developing a Super Frogs program, which is another hopefully going to be a community support system for our developer relations. But yeah, this is definitely something in progress.
Okay, Tekton. Well, Sebastian, I think we talked about this. There is the Tekton hub, and I suppose I know there is a great community around Argo. It's been very high on buzz lately. And
yes, I would say for both technologies, there's a lot happening in just the typical open source GitHub issues and things like that approach or area. So you can get involved there. There are tons of examples out there. Of course, the Tekton Hub is like one example, but even the Tekton Hub is more of the kind of official way or semi-official. If you say, oh, I created this super cool task and I want to share it with the world. But even other than that, you find many more examples on some other GitHub issues or stuff that people tried out. So since all of that is open source and available, you definitely will find some help there. And chances are, if you need to integrate some stuff in a specific Tekton task, then somebody has done that before and has struggled with a similar thing before, and there's some example for it already. So I would say, yeah, that's definitely, just given the fact that it's all open source, definitely a plus.
Yeah, so folks are struggling and nothing unifies as much as shared pain. Okay, GitHub. What about the community around GitHub?
Yeah, GitHub is, it's born by community for the community, right? So in terms of the support community, it's a quite strong presence, and you always can find the answers and share your pains on the github.community. So it's a whole ecosystem around everything what is related to the GitHub, the place where the community helps each other and as well the GitHub folks.
Okay, makes sense. That's why you have a lot of public actions, folk, and none of them of very high quality, by the way. Right? Some of them just don't work because it's a community effort. Expectable.
Yeah, I don't recall that we had a quality as a parameter for the comparing right now.
Yeah, right. Okay, quality doesn't matter. Okay, folks, we don't have a lot of time, so let's try to wrap up a little bit. Where are my categories? So we have, out of the things that weren't discussed yet, Developer experience and turnaround times. Well, I think the getting started more or less covered that. And Sebastian told us that the turnaround times in Tekton are very good, right? Because you have or in Jenkins X, was it?
Tekton, definitely Tekton. Better than
okay, in Tekton. Okay, so we don't have enough time for the turnaround. So let's talk a little bit about pricing and indirect costs. What about AWS, Melissa? What can you tell us about pricing? How transparent is the pricing?
Yes, pricing on AWS in general can be pretty scary if you're not careful. For pipelines specifically, I did a little estimate just for a simple pipeline that I had built. And they give you one free pipeline per month, an active pipeline, which is defined as something that has been around for 30 days and has been run at least once. So you'll get a charge for that. Now that charge looks like $1, like a US dollar per pipeline that is active. That seems pretty affordable, but what they don't tell you is all of the other services that you integrate with, you also pay for those. So think about your storage, think about, if you're using code commit, if you're using code deploy, if you're using code build, all of those other services come with their own costs.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay.
So it makes it difficult to estimate.
Okay, well, talking about Jenkins X, Sebastian, I suppose it's the price of your infrastructure, right?
Basically, yes. So the technology is, you can use it for free, and well, it's also easy to calculate. So as we just heard, you don't have to have a complex spreadsheet to calculate how much your CI/CD stuff costs and how often you should run it or not. No, it's basically like you say, there is only an indirect cost. So it's basically for free, but of course you will have some resources who run it, and there are some a lot of resources that you add on your Kubernetes cluster. So comparing with not having it, you will have just a higher load, and that needs to be paid. But the good thing about it, that can be calculated quite easily, because then you see the usage, and that's basically your flat fee that you pay. And that's it. And actually the same with Tekton and Argo. So all of these are for free, but of course nothing is for free. You need to run it somewhere. And this small overhead that you add, that's basically the cost of wherever your Kubernetes cluster runs.
And you need to hire some Kubernetes engineers, and these are very hard to find and expensive. Okay, what about Azure DevOps? Victoria, what's the pricing there?
Yeah, as always, it gets a bit more complex. I'm not the money person, but let me try. So when it comes to the Azure Pipelines itself, it's a pretty similar model as Melissa mentioned, that you get the one free Microsoft hosted CI/CD. So we are speaking about the hosted agent, right? And then you as well get the one free self-hosted CI/CD. And on the top of that, if you're using the Azure artifacts, you get 2 gigabytes for free. And here's the trick. Because when the vendor says that it gives you the one pipeline for free, you need to look deeper and see what does it mean actually. Because like in Azure DevOps, it means that you get 1,800 minutes per month for that pipeline. And in terms of the indirect costs, I do apologize. That is always comes into the play when you start to use the self-hosted agents, right? So roughly, like if you would go with the Microsoft hosted agent, it's plus minus $40. And sometimes what I have calculated, sometimes it's worth to use your own Azure-based or the AWS-based, it matters where you deploy, your own hosted agent, especially if you have some customizations in the requirements and so on. So, and if that doesn't sound complex, then there's additional cost, because you need to pay the basic plan for the first 5 users are for free, then the $6 per user per month, and that includes Azure Pipelines, Azure Boards, Azure Repos, Azure Artifacts. So this is anything what comes on the top. I try to make it simple for you.
Yeah. Didn't get simple. Okay. Melissa, how much does it cost to use Jfrog Platform?
So Jfrog has a completely different pricing model. It's more of a subscription-based model, and it's not based on user, it's just based on instance. So it's just going to, depend how many instances you want or how you want to scale it. That's just going to depend on what kind of load that you have. The pricing around like Jfrog Pipeline specifically, there is a free tier available that includes 2,000 minutes. And I just want to say, I'm aging myself a little bit here, but remember when you had to pay for like every text you send on a cell phone? And we used to do all that calculation. It's just kind of ridiculous. So I have a feeling that in the future, pricing for all of this stuff is going to improve dramatically. But right now we're stuck with charging per minute of usage. Also storage, since that includes Artifactory as well. You wouldn't buy pipelines separately. This is something that would be included with Artifactory. So you get 2 gigabytes for the free tier storage there. And then you also get transfer. So that's, downloading, uploading your artifacts. That's 10 gigabytes of transfer. You could double that for like $98 a month for the subscription. Then it jumps up to $699 for considerably more resources. That would be for an enterprise use. And then after that, it's custom quotes.
Okay. And back to you, Victoria, because Sebastian, we're not talking about Tekton and Argo CD pricing. It's the same as with Jenkins X, more or less. What about GitHub? I know GitHub also charges per minute, right? Are there also costs for storage and data transfer?
Yeah, kind of. It's more the subscription model, like Melissa mentioned. So there are actually the free plans. The first one is a free one, which means $0 per user per month, which includes like around 2,000 minutes of pipelines, and then 500 megabytes for the package storage. And then you have the team subscription. So that means like the $4 per user per month. And that means like, again, 3,000 automation minutes or the free for the public repository. So you can go save if you have the public repos, right? And the 2 gigabytes of the package storage or the free for the public repositories. And on the top of that, it gives some additional functionalities like the access to the GitHub code spaces, which we didn't touch here, and all other functionality. And then the last but not least, there is a GitHub Enterprise. So that's where it comes like $21 per user per month. But when we are speaking about the different level, like around 50,000 automation minutes, 50 gigabytes of the package storages, and the plenty of enterprise needed functionality like the SAML integration, the security stuff, premium support, you name it.
Okay, and we're out of time, folks. So we'll have to finish this here and proceed to the discussion zone. I'll send all of the polls, and we didn't cover security and observability, but hopefully some of you mentioned some of that, and you can talk about that in the discussion zone.